Hello and welcome to the Crux of MedTech. We go beyond the buzzwords, bringing you the insights from the innovators, investors, and leaders who are driving this life-saving space forward. Because I'm absolutely fascinated by the stories that people have to tell in MedTech. As someone who works in this sector on a daily basis, I come across so many interesting people and so many interesting stories that I think the world deserves to know about. Welcome to the Crux of MedTech.
Hello Dimitri, and welcome to the Crux of MedTech.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Henry.
It's an absolute pleasure to host you. So the first bit we want to learn about is, talk to us about your story, Dimitri. How did you get into the medical sector, and what's the journey you've been on to this point?
Always wanted to be an engineer and studied biomedical engineering. But I also wanted to, from very early on in my career, I wanted to do startups. But at first I decided I want to learn at the big companies. So I worked for J&J and Stryker. And then, dipped my foot into startups with Spiro Medical. Loved it and worked my way up. And then Spiro, the founder of Spiro, approached me to see if I wanted to join him full time, working on this great technology. And I was excited and said yes. And been here ever since 2021.
Very nice. So what was your actual kind of career story through the big companies? Like how did you get into it? What was the start when you were at Stryker and J&J and then Spiro? Just give us a bit more flavor to the story.
Sure. Yeah. What started as an intern at J&J in Warsaw, Indiana at DePuy, working on knee implants. Managed to get about 15 patents in that short tenure. And then, however, I didn't really want to live in Warsaw, Indiana, especially as like somebody in your early 20s. It's a lovely town, just not for a young 20-year-old. So I had an opportunity to come to Stryker in California, and I moved out here, have been living in California since. I love California. It's been great. There I worked in test engineering, so learned a lot about how, design failures, but also documentation, regulatory, and the whole process of what it takes to actually get a device to market. Also managed to learn some software and electrical hardware while I was at it. And then, joined Spiro Medical, where I worked my way up to director of R&D, and then that was also an amazing time. About 6 years I was there, an amazing journey there. Unfortunately, it didn't quite work out with them going through bankruptcy, but I believe they still exist as Akron Medical now. But it was a great learning opportunity.
Awesome. So Spiro, then, you met the founder of Spiro. How did you come across Spiro, and how did you get involved?
They found me through so the founder found me through a friend, we kind of had an initial conversation, liked it, liked the interaction, but at the same time, I did have a 3-month-old baby at home at the time when he was trying to convince me to join full time. So I'm like, I don't know if I could join you full time right now. Like with a 3-month-old, it's just not going to work out. But I really loved the idea and the technology that he had come up with. And the problem that he was solving. And so then I said, hey, I'll consult for you for now. And I did that, started around November. And then come March, about 3 to 6 months down the line, we decided, hey, we enjoy working with each other. My daughter also was by that time 9 months old, so I was like, okay, I could do this full time now, let's get going. It's been awesome. I enjoy. Ever since I was a kid, I enjoyed building things like Legos and medical devices now. But now I'm building a company, and I'm really enjoying that aspect of it as well.
Okay, very cool. So let's dive into Spiro. So what is Spiro? What's the challenge that Spiro is trying to solve, and what's the approach to solving that challenge?
Yeah, so we're solving difficult tracheal intubation. So there's 30 million tracheal intubations in the U.S. every year. It's about 60 million worldwide. And in the U.S., about 20% of them are difficult, so about 6.3 million. And we've come up with a technology and device that makes all intubations easy. And we do that by essentially combining a video laryngoscope with a robotic bronchoscope. And that makes, like I said, all intubations easy.
Okay. So in really easy to understand terms, what is intubation, and I guess what's the problem with it in this this current state?
Yeah, so intubation involves taking, a tube and going through somebody's mouth, or sometimes nose, but for the most part through somebody's mouth, getting it past their tongue and slipping it in between their vocal cords and into the trachea, and then inflating a balloon to seal it so that you can ventilate a patient. Now, as you can imagine, your body generally doesn't want anything to go into your trachea or your windpipe, so the natural thing is if you just try to stick it in the tube, most of the time it will go into the esophagus. So you have to kind of really lift it up and angulate it. And today's tools, there's direct laryngoscopes, which kind of look essentially like a shoehorn. And then there's video laryngoscopes, which have a camera at the end of them. And the camera at the end of the video laryngoscope provides you a great visualization of the vocal cords that you need to go through, but it doesn't help you navigate that tube. That tube is still in the clinician's hand, and they have to be really skilled at actually getting it in there and not getting into the esophagus, or just, essentially getting it to the right place. And on some patients, it's not, it still takes skill, but on some patients, it's a straightforward approach, and I would say on the majority of patients, at about 80% of patients, it's a straightforward thing. But if the patient is obese or has obstructive sleep apnea or has any kind of neck limitations where they can't tilt their neck back, it can be really difficult to place that tube, even if somebody that is incredibly skilled at doing so. And so that's what our device does. Now, if somebody is less skilled at doing so, having these difficult patients makes it next to impossible for them to do.
Amazing. So. Can you describe kind of the transformation between how it's currently done and so I've watched the video when we did the prep for this call, and it was incredibly fast and incredibly immediate. And so how have you managed to do that? What's the kind of delivery mechanism, and how have you managed to achieve that such a quick rate of intubation in comparison to the challenges that happen with more complex cases?
Yeah, so basically, like I said, we take the video laryngoscope and we provide great visualization with one camera, but then we have a robotic endoscope. So using joystick and buttons, you can navigate a robotic endoscope into the trachea. And what our device does, it makes that distance very short that you have to navigate the scope. It's only about 4 centimeters that you have to go from the end of our blade until you're in the patient's trachea. And so that, in navigating it with a joystick, gives you really high precision control, and that makes it really easy to get in there. And once the endoscope is inside, you use the endoscope as a guide for the endotracheal tube, and you just gently slide it over. And the beauty of the device is it allows troubleshooting, because we have the dual cameras, one camera on the scope, one camera outside. If your tube gets hung up somewhere or something else, you can see what's going on, you can visualize it, you can manipulate it so that you get past whatever is in your way, and then you can continue sliding it over. And so that we found that was very important. So we kept the tube advancement manual, so they can twist, they can feel it. If they're getting hung up on something, they're not going to cause injury. They can, like I said, visualize what's happening, advance it, and then once they're in the trachea, they get immediate confirmation that the tube made it, because the camera at the end of the scope sees the tube, and you say, okay, yes, I made it to the perfect spot, now I'm done. You remove the device, and like I said, the patient's intubated, and this can all happen in as quickly as 30 seconds or less.
I'm interrupting this episode to bring you a word from our sponsors, TTP. TTP is a leader in complex medical technology development with deep scientific and engineering expertise. They support ambitious medtech companies in solving high-risk, high-complexity challenges where there's no margin for error. Whether you're tackling uncharted technical territory or racing to bring a product to market, TTP provide clarity and direction. By de-risking innovation and ensuring seamless alignment with regulatory and manufacturing demands, TTP help you move forward with speed and confidence. To find out more, check out the show notes. Okay, excellent. So that's the robotics approach robotics approach by Spiro can take less than 30 seconds. How long would it take to do this manually in comparison on average?
It's highly variable. In a very straightforward patient, one that's not difficult, it also takes about 30 seconds. But in a patient that's difficult, where you're taking multiple tries, the patient's running out of air, you normally get about a minute to 2 minutes of trying. And if you're not succeeding, then you remove your video laryngoscope, you remove the tube, you put the mask back on the patient, and hopefully you can what's called bag mask ventilate the patient. You put that back on, you get their O2 stats back up to where you can then try again. So that process can take 10-15 minutes of them starting, trying, stopping, and keeping going like that. And then eventually, in some severe instances, they cancel the surgery, and in others where, in the worst case scenario, where they can't bag mask ventilate, they start to discuss opening up and doing a tracheostomy, and if that happens to then fail, then the patient could get seriously injured, including brain damage and death, are a possible outcome, because, like I said, these patients are not breathing on their own.
Okay, wow. So how did the idea of Spiro come about then? So you say it was a founder that came across Spiro. How did that come about? Was it like, hey, we want to try and solve this problem, and then approach you about finding the solution, or did they already have an idea of how they might solve the problem?
Yeah, so the founder of Spiro, Dr. Vladimir Nikenzi, he is a Stanford professor of anesthesia and also manages the Stanford Difficult Airway program, and he teaches difficult airways, or how to intubate difficult airways, all over the world. So he is an expert in the field, and the general consensus was, hey, video laryngoscopes have kind of reached the limit of what they can do and what we can do with them. And there's still a large gap, right? They're significantly better than direct laryngoscopes are or were, but there's still this gap where we took it from, a 80% success rate to a 90% success rate in some populations, and other populations we took it from a 70 to an 80 to 85% first pass success rate, but we still have a lot of complications, and there's still that 15% that we fail at, especially in the ICU on the first attempt. So we need a different solution. And at the same time, there's papers being published on something called the dual technique, where you take a video laryngoscope and a bronchoscope, and you need two clinicians, two pieces of equipment, and you use that to intubate one patient. And now that's okay in a teaching institution, but outside of a teaching institution where you don't have residents readily available, it's not practical to do that. So the idea came about, hey, what if we can, make a robotic bronchoscope that combines with the video laryngoscope, and that way you can do this operation one-handed instead of needing 3 to 4 hands to do it. And that's the concept and idea that he came up with, and they brought me on to make that kind of dream idea a reality.
Okay, so how did you join so we've talked about how you joined the company from you came on as a consultant, you had your baby at the time, but what happened from there? How did you start building out the start of the company? How did you start approaching this problem and trying to solve it?
Well, even when I was consulting, we were brainstorming solutions. We got different endoscopes, and we were trying to figure out on how to the market's moving towards disposable bronchoscopes, so we needed a disposable bronchoscope that's robotic, and then a video laryngoscope. So we went through different design iterations of prototypes, and we also partnered with an industrial endoscope manufacturer to help us get the first scopes across, especially like things like articulation sections. We didn't want to be designing that early on in the process, so we're able to borrow on some of their technology to put this together. And we went from not having a device by the time I joined in March to having a fully functional prototype by that summer. Now, some of that is, like I said, partnering with the right folks. Some of it is the fact that I can also do, mechanical and electrical and write the firmware to go along with it. We did also have a team of consultants that helped us with some of the software and the AI element as well. That's something that's coming out in the future that we're working on, where all you do is press and hold a button and the AI will intubate and navigate the robot for you. Now, like I said, that's a future product that we're working on, but we were able to prototype that early on and get that working in a mannequin within about 6 months or so.
Okay, cool. And so what are you guys working on at the moment? What's the next stages for you? What stage is the company at right now?
So the team's working really hard on getting FDA clearance, and we should have we should be ready for our 510(k) submission by September of this year, and then hopefully we can get our FDA clearance fairly quickly. It's a 510(k), and hopefully will be pretty straightforward to get clearance, and then at that point we'll be probably doing some post-market clinical studies and doing some early commercialization work to get it out and get people using the device. But right now, the primary focus is getting through our FDA clearance first and foremost. At the same time, we are trying to raise some money to make that a little bit quicker and easier for ourselves.
Okay. So when the users actually get the robotic system in their hands, like how do they react? What's the kind of feedback you guys get when people start not using it because it's not being used actually in patients yet, but when they get it in their hand and they start to see the potential of the technology?
For the most of them love it. Some say, "Oh, you're going to put me out of a job." That's not our goal. Our goal is to make a tool for anesthesiologists as well as CRNAs and intensivists that intubate to make their life easier. But some of them do jokingly say that, and many of them agree that, hey, I've now seen the future of what intubation will look like soon. And on that side too, we did have our clinical study that we did in Lithuania. We enrolled 30 patients, and we got through our first in human clinical study, and that went really well. We went with highly complicated patients, really difficult to intubate patients, and every single one of them we intubated easily, and that gives us a lot of confidence that we'll be able to do that when we're commercially available in the market.
Okay. And has there been anything that's kind of surprised you about the way? Because there's obviously, as an engineering something or building something, you have some theories about the way the product's going to be used and how it's going to react and things like that, and then you put it in the hand of a user who has not built it and doesn't really know. Has there been anything that surprised you where you've had to maybe pivot or change things from the design process when it's actually got into the hands of the users?
No, I think we spent. I mean, the team I have is very experienced, especially in the area of ergonomics and everything else. So I think we designed a device overall that works really well. Initially, we did have early on in the process, we did get some. We designed it for more like, I guess, my hands and the founder's hands. I'm a rock climber, so I guess, unnaturally strong hands. And then when we first got it to clinicians' hands, they're like, this requires too much force to use. Like, this is uncomfortable. So then we did have to adapt the design to that. But before we went into our clinical study, and the design now we have that worked out. But yeah, that was definitely a little bit of a learning experience there. And then the other part from our clinical study, we underestimated the importance of the cart that holds all the equipment, making sure that that's well thought out, and it's a critical part of the device, because initially it's kind of an afterthought, but it is really important from a usability perspective and from a convenience perspective, that, hey, there is a cart that goes along with it. Now, if they choose not to use it, that's on them. But it is important to have something that is ready-made, that they can be like, hey, yes, everything has its place, and it can easily be, you got it, you set it up, and it's good to go.
Sure. Beyond intubation, are there any other areas where this technology could be applicable or useful in the future?
So we have some ideas for, there's obviously, there's adjacent products to this. One is, it wouldn't be a big deal for us to make a video laryngoscope for the easy to intubate patients. And then handheld robotic bronchoscopy is definitely an area we're looking into, because having a small robotic bronchoscope, something that is much lighter and smaller footprint than an intuitive ion, but can do not nearly all the functionality, but more competing with the Ambu scopes of the world and doing more than what a regular bronchoscope can do. We definitely think there's a future there and a kind of a gap in the market. And then beyond that, we're looking at some interesting areas around laryngeal surgery. If you look at the tools used in laryngeal surgery today, they're they're very medieval looking. Like, they're just seeing how the patients have to be positioned for some of those surgeries, it looks terrifying. I'm like, I hope I never have to get one of those. So we have some ideas on how to do that better, but that's still very early for us. Like I said, we're laser focused on intubation right now, but we see plenty of opportunities in the future to do other things as well.
Okay, very cool. And you guys just brought on a chief commercial officer as well to help build out the commercial structure of the future. Can you tell us a little bit about how you guys are preparing for market and what your commercial considerations are?
Yeah, we brought on Trey Gordon. He brings a wealth of experience in getting devices to market, brand new devices to the market, and we're really excited to have him. We're actively working on partnerships with clinicians and hospitals, right? We're obviously going to do the best we can to bring the best device to the market, but at the same time, we're looking for folks that are willing to partner with us to make sure that we can make the device better, get their feedback, get the device into their hands, get in using the device, and then make sure that we can make any product enhancement that we need to make before rolling this out, across everywhere. And that's what we're actively working on right now, is establishing those partnerships.
Another quick interruption to tell you about our sponsors, KUKA. KUKA is a global leader in robotics with over 25 years of experience partnering with medtech companies on their journey to market. Their reputation is built on robust technology, reliability, and long-term collaboration. More than a supplier, KUKA provides trusted support throughout the product lifecycle, from development to integration and beyond. For companies exploring robotic solutions, the KUKA LBR Med offers a ready-to-integrate, state-of-the-art option that meets the highest medical standards, without the need to build from scratch. If you want to find out more, then head to the show notes and follow the link to KUKA's website.
Excellent. And so before getting FDA clearance, what's the benefit of bringing someone in who's highly experienced in commercialization? Have you seen any impact already of how it helped shape the technology or shape the company at this stage?
It's only, I think, his second week. So in terms of shaping technology and company, it's a bit early, but we do think, I've seen the work he's doing, and it definitely is helping us think through the process of what we're going to need to actually commercialize the device, as well as just like I said, you can't just say, okay, hey, we have our FDA clearance. Hey, doctors, here's a device, let's use it. You have to build those relationships ahead of time, make sure that your clinicians know that your technology exists, the ones you need to know that, and then make sure you have, like I said, those relationships established so you can go into those facilities, and once you have clearance, and you can start using it in the first month or two, as opposed to having to wait 3 to 6 months before they're like, oh, okay, some new technology, I got to learn about it. This allows us to really get a head start in making sure that we can hit the ground running when we actually do have our FDA clearance. And I think, Trey is having an impact there. We're having a lot of meetings with clinicians and getting out in front of them. And like I said, trying to really identify those partners for us.
Cool. And this is obviously your first CEO role. You've been an engineering leader within Potrero before. Talk to me about how you found that transition to being a CEO of a company and building a business in comparison to building engineering teams and R&D teams.
In some ways it's not that different. It's just, building a team and mentoring people and helping and doing what it takes to make sure your team has the resources to succeed. At the same time, initially it was when I was at the very beginning, it was pretty much just me as the only full-time person, so that was a bit lonely and tricky, but once not to say, like I said, I had the founder was there, and as well as we had a number of consultants, so I wasn't entirely by myself. But still, the day-to-day, it was just me. So whatever work was happening, it was a lot of it was still me, and that part was a bit lonely at times. But we got through that, and now, like I said, I have an amazing team, and we're getting a lot of momentum. It's in terms of the biggest, I guess, challenge for me was I feel like when I was in engineering management, I had this, I knew what I was doing. We had a plan, and yes, sometimes the plan didn't quite work. But for almost every day, I had a to-do list. I could get that to-do list done, and I would go home saying, okay, yeah, I got done what I need to get done. Doing the CEO thing, I always feel like I can do more, and also just it always kind of feels like I'm putting out the largest fire that at any given moment or place. And that I've still not fully adjusted to that, because like I said, I'm usually a person that has their to-do list. I get my to-do list done. But I feel like since I was CEO, like I get my to-do list done, what I think it was there, but then there's 10 more things added every day that I didn't expect, and just kind of keeping that list is never finished at all times. And that's been tricky to adjust to. But I'm getting there.
How have you learned to manage that then? So obviously you're still getting there, but like what have you done to try and help that large firefighting process?
Just one aspect is brutal prioritization. So knowing some things are just not going to get done, even if I work 24 hours a day. Some things are just not going to get done, and learning how to see, okay, this is truly important. Know that some of these things, they can wait, and they will become important later, maybe, or maybe not. Maybe they'll fall off. It kind of depends. Some things that are a problem today, you can't ignore, and they'll just go away. That's not true of most problems, but there are some. But at the same time, you just have to make sure you pick the most important ones and take care of the critical aspects, and then, as we've progressed, leaning on my team more and more, because we are growing as an organization, and now I have a lot of folks I can rely on, and it's been great.
How big is the team now?
So there's 6 of us full time, and then about 14, 15 of us if you count consultants. So it's been great.
Nice. And how have you found fundraising as a first-time CEO? Like, do you find it something as an enjoyable process? And are you finding it challenging? What's your thoughts around raising funds in the startup world?
I mean, it's definitely an emotional roller coaster. There's times where you're thinking you're very very close to closing something, and then it doesn't pan out. And there's a when you do close something, it's a very good feeling. I was talking to another engineering founder CEO, and it's funny. It's like a complete opposite of what engineering generally is. Like, right, you work on a problem, you either found a way on how not to do something, or you fix the problem. So no matter what, when you're working on an engineering problem, you have a sense of accomplishment that like something happened. Like I said, I figured out a way not to do it, or I figured out a way to do it. With fundraising, it's a lot more like the sales process, right? So you're knocking on doors, you're sending out emails, and a lot of times you just feel like you're sending these things out into the void, and you have no idea if you've made any progress whatsoever. And that's been hard to adjust to as well as an engineer. But I'm getting better at it slowly.
Okay. And you're fundraising at the minute. So what's that fundraising going to enable you to do as a company at Spiro?
Yeah. So we're trying to raise $6 million right now to get past our FDA clearance, as well as do some additional clinical studies. So we did our 30-patient clinical study in Lithuania. We're planning on doing, after we get FDA clearance, do some post-market studies in the United States, both in the operating room as well as the ICU, and get more clinician use under our belt. And we actually did just get an Air Force grant to help pay for some of those post-market studies. So we're really excited about that. We just learned last week that we got a $1.8 million grant from the U.S. Air Force. So that's exciting. And then we also plan on doing a OUS clinical study using our AI product. So we'll probably go back to Lithuania and use our AI algorithm that we've been actively working on, where you press and hold a button and the AI navigates the scope for the clinician. And so we're going to try that out, like I said, probably in Lithuania, and we're going to aim to do that early next year.
Nice. And you've talked a lot about FDA. Is there plans to internationalize and globalize once FDA's kind of off the ground?
Yeah, yes. Not exactly sure on exact timing of it. Whether or not it makes sense to. It kind of depends. Not with this $6 million round that we're raising, but with future rounds, absolutely. And we do seem to have a lot of interest from Europe as well as Middle East on using the technology, and we're excited to get it in their hands as well. But we just have to make sure that we position our resources strategically.
Okay, excellent. And I'd like to talk a little bit more about the market and where you see the future of the space headed. So it's technically not a surgical robotics product. It's robotics in robotics in surgery. I don't know how you'd describe it. But generally, what are you seeing as some of the key trends within the either robotic surgery space or in the space where you're operating right now? How you'd describe it?
Yeah, I think we call ourselves like a medical robotics, not surgical robotics. But I don't know how these terms come about necessarily. But what I see, I think from our perspective, it doesn't make sense to compete with the likes of Intuitive from in the spaces they operate today, nor in their form factor, right? Trying to make a Da Vinci right now or Intuitive Ion, it just doesn't make sense. It's there. If you come up with a new way of doing it or a new therapy that you can use a robot for, they're going to outmatch you pretty quickly. So our general approach is go into a space that they're not working in at all, and also a completely different form factor than what they're using. So a much more affordable robot that is, an order of magnitude or several orders of magnitude cheaper than what they charge for theirs. And then once we start to own that market, we can expand into other avenues as well. But part of the idea is to keep make robots that do one task really, really well, so that you don't have one giant robot that occupies an OR that does a lot of things well, but instead one small affordable robot does a specific task very well, and and then you can have a closet full of these robots that and only get the robots that you for the procedures you really need for your high volume ones, instead of having a robot where you're using it in things where it may not be optimized for, because you just have the robot and you have time available on the robot, and you need to I believe their current business model is you have to spend a certain dollar amount on disposables, and so that's that wouldn't be the idea here. You could own it free and clear, and you can just use it on the things that you need.
Okay, so going ahead on with Intuitive, completely see why you wouldn't want to do that, but why wouldn't you want to do that to make it really, really simple?
And they have more money than we could ever dream of at the moment, and to compete with them in a space, and they have a lot of great engineers and a lot of great experience doing it. So once again, if you identify a therapeutic area where a robot could excel over doing the procedure manually, but the form factor is the same as the Da Vinci, I imagine it would take them no time to adopt the Da Vinci to be able to do that same thing fairly quickly. So you would always, they could catch up much quicker than you could bring a massive robot to the market. And so that's where having a completely different form factor, and also operating a space that they're not really operating in, we can fly under the radar, so to speak, for now.
Sure. So what are you most excited about for the future of Spiro?
Well, I'm excited about solving difficult tracheal intubation and getting this into the clinicians' hands that really need it, and having better patient outcomes for the patients that are difficult to intubate. And that's our starting point, and from there, building on that as our first step, and building out a handheld robotics company from there. Okay, interesting.
So to leave people with any closing thoughts, what would you like to leave the audience thinking about Spiro, or what do you want the audience to know as some of the key things to leave as a closing few thoughts?
So as I mentioned, we're trying to solve the problem of difficult tracheal intubation, and for me personally, knowing a lot more about intubation than I did at the start of this, if me or any family member needs to get intubated, I have kind of almost a terror now that I never had before about knowing everything that can go wrong. And so to me, I hope that once we get this device to the market, that if a family member needs to get intubated, that they would get intubated with our device to make sure that they're safe, and that, like I said, we can ensure all the patients with a positive outcome from this, and for the clinicians as well, make their life easier, because quite a few clinicians we've talked to, everybody has, or most people have, that story where, oh yeah, this patient, this went wrong and this went wrong and this went wrong, and it's not their fault per se. It's this massive stack up of consequences where the patient took out their tube, but their tissues were already really swollen, and then they had to go back in, and then they couldn't, and then that patient slipped away from them, and those are scar tissues that these clinicians carry, and I'd prefer to avoid that for the sake of the patient, and as well for the sake of the clinician. It's really hard
Awesome.
to deal with those things.
And as someone, so effectively, as a seal of approval, wanting it to be used on family and friends is definitely a seal of approval. For your devices. Give me 1 second. I'm just gonna re-record that bit because I kind of stumbled over my words. So for a seal of approval, it's really strong to know that a CEO backs the technology and would rather their family and friends use the device than not, to kind of help them out. So appreciate you jumping on with me today, Dimitri, and thank you for joining me on the Crux of MedTech.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for joining me on the Crux of MedTech podcast. If you're not already doing so, please go ahead and subscribe on YouTube or follow the podcast on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. This podcast is proudly brought to you by Crux. Crux is a medtech search firm which places pioneers in transformative roles to help us live longer, healthier lives. We do 3 things for companies. We help hire world-class executive talent. We help companies raise investment from Series A to Series C and execute upon M&A. And we also are building a community of medtech leaders to facilitate peer-to-peer learning and accelerate the companies to help them go faster. If you're interested in any of those 3 things, please reach out to me on LinkedIn or follow the link in the show notes to find out more. Thank you.